Hey guys, I am IzDaisho and I am here coming to you to do something a little bit different than I usually do. Most of what I do is upload my Hearthstone, do some live commentary and that kind of thing, but today I'm going to give you a couple of tips to get to the legend rank. I am not really the best player, but I figured since I've gotten there a couple of times, maybe I have some expertise that I can share with some people. I was looking on r/Hearthstone today, and there was somebody who commented saying that they had a lot of trouble trying to get to legend, and they were stuck between ranks 2 and 5 for a while. And then I was reading through the comments, and there was just a large number of people who were having the same kind of issues, and this is hopefully going to help a little bit for those kind of players. Unfortunately, it's not going to really benefit the person who's ranked 10 through 14. I think what you need to do is probably get some more experience with Hearthstone first before you decide to try and make the push for legend. But those of you who are ranked 2 through 5, you've probably been playing this game for a while and you know the basics. So I'm not going to say exactly how to play the game or anything, but I'm going to give you hopefully a couple of pointers that'll help out. So today the agenda is going to first talk about my history, why I think I'm partially qualified to do this. Then I'm going to talk about what deck I'm going to use. I'm going to follow that up with some gameplay tips and then some stuff that you need to be doing outside the game if you want to win. Okay, so my history. As I said, I'm not the best Hearthstone player there. I'm not trying to get to top 16 in the ladder or top 5 or whatever. I don't think that I'm good enough to do that. I think that I'm about good enough to make legend and not much higher than that. I've been legend in 2 of the last 3 seasons. I didn't really have enough time to dedicate to Hearthstone to get to legend in the season in between, but 2 out of the last 3 I managed to get there. It took me a long time and it wasn't easy. I have about a 65% win rate, especially with the decks that I do decide to settle on, which is going to be a large portion of what this video is about. And it took me a little bit just under 150 wins to get to legend, so I think that 200 is about where most people are at, and 100 is for the very, very good players, but it was about 150 for me. So again, I think I'm sort of in the middle of the legendary players. So not the greatest Hearthstone player there, and I'm not ever going to claim that, but I think I know how to play and I know what to do. So first of all, let's talk about your deck. Choose your deck. It's really important to be comfortable and enjoy the play style of your deck. If you don't enjoy playing Hearthstone, then you're not going to be able to get to legend. You're not going to have enough fun, and you're going to stop after playing 50 games with the deck, and you're never going to get past that hump. So you really have to make sure before choosing your deck that it's comfortable. Unfortunately, that's not the only concern that you can make for the deck. You also have to judge its power level. So if at your heart you are a priest player, unless you're very, very talented, it's going to be really tough to get to legend. Actually, I mean, the current meta is shifting towards priest being good, but that's besides the point. And when I say good, that's relative compared to how it was. But anyway, priest, paladin, mage, these classes are really lower right now, and there could be a situation in the future where they rise, but you have to choose a deck that not only it fits your playstyle and you're comfortable playing, but it also has to be one that you think is powerful enough. So if you don't have any legends, then you might not want to play warrior control, that kind of thing. Then of course there's the metagame, what's popular right now. So if warrior control is your favorite deck, this is just another example, and people are playing that Hunter Beast deck that plays Savannah High Main, it might not be the best time to roll out with the warrior deck. So you probably want to figure out either an adaptation to try and beat Savannah High Main, because that card is just a stone cold killer in that matchup, or you can choose a different deck. And that's probably recommended. You want your deck to at least have favorable not favorable, but at least even to slightly unfavorable matchups against the top decks. You want to make sure that every time you come up against Zoo, you're not losing, and then complaining and blaming it on something else. You're just going to say, oh, well, my opponent was playing Zoo. How could I have ever won that game? When you make your deck choice, that's part of the game. Going into it, you have to know, well, every time I play, 80% of the time it's going to be Zoo. So I need to make sure that my deck can beat something like Zoo. And then finally, net decking is a very important thing, and it's how most people should play, because basically the idea is that other people are doing the work for you. There are streamers and just hardcore players who play for hours and hours and hours a day, and then they post their decks online. So why do you need to make your own deck where you only have 3 hours of practice with when you can copy somebody else's deck. And some people might say, oh, you should build your own deck, net decking is cheating. At this point, when you're stuck on ranks 2 through 5, you really need any advantage you can get, because all the players that you're going to be playing against are going to be competent, and any tiny advantage by having the slightly updated list to the metagame is important. What you do need to take note of is that these players, even after tuning these decks for many, many hours, they still make changes all the time. So when you're looking at decks online, make sure that you're not looking at an outdated version. You could be playing the Hunter Beast deck, but playing it with the Traps and the Eaglehorn Bow. Once all the other players started playing the Hunter decks, Traps became bad, so you had to take out the flares. Now maybe if enough people are adapting, you can take the flares out because nobody's playing Traps anymore. But you really have to just kind of adjust to the metagame, the decks that you are taking from the internet. And now continuing on this subject is that you really have to stick with your deck. Once you make your decision, or I mean you can change your decision, but pretty much once you make your decision to play a deck, you really have to play a ton of games with it. It's going to take a long time to figure out the matchups. There's going to be variance, so playing this against a deck 5 times is not enough to understand the matchup, all the ins and outs of the matchup. You might not know which cards are good to mulligan against, or mulligan, because maybe you never had that card in your opening hand. So if you don't know that Fiery War Axe is really, really good against Zoo, then you might think to mulligan. I mean, you probably wouldn't think to mulligan that. That's an extreme example. But there are a much more fringe cards where that actually could come up and it could be an issue. But yeah, stick with it. You'll learn the matchups. You'll learn the cards to mulligan over time. You really, really need to put the time in. This is where one of the points that I'm going to bring up later is going to come in, which is reading articles and discussing it. But we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video. Next, we're going to talk about tuning your deck. Staying ahead of the metagame is very, very critical. I touched on it earlier, but you don't really want to have every single card that you saw online. You want to make sure that you see what that deck is, and that's going to be the most popular deck. So like the Kaleno Hunter deck and the Zoo Lock deck, those were the most played decks for a long time, and they probably still are right now when I'm making this video. So you really need to stay ahead of the metagame, try and figure out what cards you can put in that'll beat that matchup. If you think that Ironbeak Owl is really, really good in the format, toss it in there, try it out, make sure that you can stay ahead of the metagame. You always want to be slightly unexpected. If you can throw out a couple of cards that your opponent's not expecting, that can really, really change a matchup drastically. When you're playing at these top ranks, your opponent's going to be a good player. They're going to know what kind of cards are in your deck. They know the standard decks. So anytime you can throw out a card that they're not expecting, you can really have the opportunity to gain advantage in a game. So definitely make sure you do that. For the gameplay, I'm not going to really give you any specific tips other than focus. Avoid distractions, both physical and mental. For a while, I was playing while either talking to people on Facebook, watching Netflix, even listening to music for me. Maybe some people can play while listening to music, but really, if you're serious about getting to Legend, dedicate the time to just playing Hearthstone. It can get really boring when your opponent's a slow player and you're just sitting there for 60 seconds not doing anything, but consider your plays. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. You see a player like Trump who has more hours in this game than almost anyone, and he still takes the whole timer sometimes on a simple arena play. You really are never sure of your decision. Not never, but most of the time you can't be sure of your decision. So think about what your opponent's going to do on their turn, and then what you can do to counter that. Think through all your options. Sometimes the 90-second time limit isn't enough, but if you're not using your opponent's turn to think, then you're wasting some of your extra time. So as much as it's enticing and more enjoyable of an experience overall, you should really avoid any distractions. If you're not in the mental state to play, if you just had a bad conversation with a friend or whatever, anything is not going on well in your life, it's not a good time to start trying to ladder. You're just going to get more frustrated when you lose, and you're just going to lose a small edge. Hearthstone is really a game of very, very small percentages. If you are playing an even matchup and you're not completely focused, you make a tiny misplay because you're focused on what's happening in the newest episode of whatever TV show you're watching, then you're going to lose that game, and you're going to lose 5% more of your games. And it's going to change it from going 60% to 65%, and it's going to take you another 50 games to get to Legend, or I don't really know the exact percentages, but it's going to take a long time. The only other thing that I have to say, prediction: know the metagame. Know what your opponents are going to be playing. Know how to handle that. Save the cards that you need for each specific deck. Obviously, this goes along with mulliganing. Finally, my last slide, outside of the game. Discussion. Go on Twitch. Watch the streamers, especially the good ones who are top 10 Legend. I mean, you have access to seeing the best players work on the game and talk to you about it and like interact with you, as well as reading articles by those players, or even not as good players who are my caliber or slightly higher or slightly lower, who are writing articles about this game and who are sharing their kind of experiences. Talking with friends about the metagame, saying, oh, did you play against Hunter last week? He had this crazy new tech where they're playing Tundra Rhino now. And then all of a sudden you see your opponent play Tundra Rhino, you know you have to kill it because next turn you're going to get Savannah Highmane and the game's going to end or something like that. I mean, it's just an example, but basically talking out the metagame is going to help you in-game. And then as well, so talking with friends or adding the player who just crushed you with this crazy tech. See if they found an article online talking about the deck, or maybe they'll teach you about the deck. You can always just add your opponents. Most of the time they won't accept, but when they do, you can gain another friend and another person to talk to you about Hearthstone. Using all of these resources, you're going to understand the matchups in such a more complex way, and you're going to be able to really just improve those percentage points slightly in your favor. And finally, understand your expectations. Nobody wins 100% of their games. Nobody wins 90% of their games. You're going to win slightly more than you lose, and that's how you're going to get to something like Legends. If you lose 5 games in a row, just understand the percentages. Like, that is going to happen. The key is to not get frustrated. That's going to lead to you losing focus and not being able to pay attention, concentrate, make sure that you understand how to make the best plays. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it helps. Please give me feedback. I would love to hear it. Have a wonderful day.